Hi, this is Matt Heffernan. Welcome back to my channel. I know it's a little different seeing me on camera. Usually I am doing things from a screen, but this is going to be a little bit of a different video. So you might be wondering, where have I been for the last month? I haven't put out any videos in a while. And, well, the truth is, I've been moving. So let me show you what that kind of looks like right now.
This is Matt's 8-bit basement cave. I don't know. This is going to be basically where I'm going to be working from now on because this is my new place. In fact, it's not that new because I lived in a very similar place before in this fairly familiar city to me. It's Rochester, New York, where once upon a time I lived for about 5 years back in the 90s because I was attending Rochester Institute of Technology, my alma mater. I got my undergraduate degree there in computer engineering, and it's where I first learned how to program an assembly language. Coming in, I only knew BASIC and maybe a bit of Logo, and never really did a whole lot of serious programming or really had any deep knowledge of how computers worked. And this is where I learned the basic skills that I'm trying to now impart to everybody here on YouTube. But let's go back all the way to when I first showed up at RIT. Of course, I was interested in computers. I really loved computers. I had a lot of experience with computers at school and at home. And by the time I got to RIT, my computer was a Tandy 1000HX, complete with a CGA-like RGB monitor and running DeskMate and all this other fun, Tandy stuff, but also a lot of cool games that I played on it too, especially games from the Sierra adventure series, like even King's Quest V I could play on this, albeit in 16 color mode with no recorded sound. But it had the Tandy 3 voice synth on it, and it was a pretty good experience. And in fact, some would argue a better experience because you didn't have to hear some of the stilted acting on that original CD-ROM. But once I got here, I got exposed to some more sophisticated means of computing. Like Sun Microsystems had these workstations, and that's where we did our initial computer science classes on, where we first took that formal approach of learning computer science and how to program, and in the language that is probably not used too much anymore, called Modula 2. It's sort of a evolution of Pascal. But anyway, we had these 68,000 and later Spark-based Suns, like the one you see here. But that was what we used on more of an individual basis. What the big mainframe, and again, back then we had such a thing as a mainframe, was a digital equipment VAX machine, like this VAX 9000. And this was a single computer that virtually every student at RIT had an account on and would log into. And you could have a significant part of the student body logged into that at a given time because it ran the VMS operating system, which is, of course, a very high availability mainframe based operating system. And you could do all sorts of things, including go on the internet, which you could do with the Sun machines too. And in fact, by my sophomore year, the Sun machines had Mosaic installed on them, this fancy new thing called a graphical web browser. Because before that, my freshman year, that wasn't really available yet. But what you did have was basic internet protocols like IRC, Usenet, of course, email, and things that we don't even really have anymore, like Gopher. Those were all perfectly accessible on my Tandy 1000 because they were all text-based. But really, that experience of the web with graphical hypertext really changed the game and made computers like my trusty Tandy 1000 not really appropriate anymore for modern computing. So by the time I graduated, I had one of the classic beige box machines, looked very much like this, and it was running Windows 95 and, of course, the Netscape suite for getting online because at that point, Internet Explorer, it did exist at that time, but it was not really usable. It was not well supported, and Netscape was still the de facto standard. Of course, that did not last too long past my period of graduation. So once I graduated from RIT, well, I found a job. I had a bunch of job offers. It was the 90s. Things were moving fast. And so in my career, I've moved around from here to there, but staying in the general northeastern area. And now I've found myself coming right back to Rochester. And in fact, back to the very same apartment complex that I lived at the time that I graduated from RIT.
But the last time I lived here, it was 1998, and that's a very different time than now. For instance, there was no Wi Fi. Well, how did we do things without Wi Fi? A little bit different.
Of course, in 1998, like most people, I did not have access to broadband internet outside of like having a fiber optic line dropped at my house, which was, of course, just not doable. That was insanely expensive. So my only means of communication outside the house through electronic means was over the phone line. And of course, to get a phone line to connect to a computer, you needed to have a modem. And I had one very much like this in my plain beige box computer, an ISA internal modem. I believe it was a 14 kilobit modem. And of course, it was a fax modem. And then you could do these amazing futuristic things like compose a document on your computer and then fax it to somebody without having to print it out and scan it. It was really an amazing time to be alive. So, in order to actually get online, of course, I had to have an internet service provider. And luckily, I was still a college student. And so I had free internet service through the university. So I would dial into the university and then I would be able to get online. I would have a straight up modem access, and then that would translate into a PPP connection, and then I'd have the TCP/IP stack on my computer, and that was still a fairly new thing to have in the 90s on a computer. And in fact, Windows 95 was the first Microsoft operating system to really have a lot of that stuff built in. Now, because I shared an apartment with 3 other guys, we only had one phone line. And that meant that if anybody wanted to get online, they would have to take over that phone line. That meant nobody was receiving phone calls, and none of us had cell phones at the time. Again, back in the 90s, very few people, only people that had a lot of money or a job that really required it had cell phones at that point. And so, in order for us to get online, we would just say, all right, I'm going to connect online. Please don't try to pick up the phone and kill my connection. And I would get on and download my email, maybe check a few things on the web if I'm doing some sort of research. I'm looking on there. No Google quite yet, but there was Alta Vista and Web Crawler and a lot of these early search engines for finding things. And it worked out. And our relationship to the internet was very different back then. We weren't just connecting on there to stream anything because we just didn't have the bandwidth to do it. But of course, we were consuming the web and there was content to be consumed. And one of those content creators by 1998 was me. I had created a couple websites. I was an early adopter of HTML, creating my own websites and hosting them from my university account. And the first site that I got any sort of real traction on, well, was thanks to Yahoo. And back then, Yahoo was really just a big directory, a sort of a hierarchical tree of website links. And I took it upon myself, because since such things didn't exist back then, to create an episode guide for South Park, which was just in its first season at that point. And so I submitted this to Yahoo and got added on there, and it had that new tag on it for a while, which meant a lot of people. And at least in terms of 1998, it was a lot of people logging on and, of course, clogging up the bandwidth at the university, coming to see my webpage, because there was nothing like that. There was no Wikipedia. There was no Netflix. There was even Comedy Central didn't have much of a website at the time. They didn't have a really in-depth episode guide back then. And so this filled that niche. And my obsession with South Park at the time led me to tape that whole first season. And in fact, they after the first season ran, they did a marathon, and I just taped that whole marathon on VHS tape with my VCR. And that's, of course, how we did things back then. There was no video capture on computers. That was a really expensive thing that you had to have special equipment for at that time. But by having that tape, that allowed one of my roommates, who at the time was known as part of Sudden Death, a comedy hip hop act, which effectively became a solo act, and his stage name, Devo Spice, as since it eclipsed Sudden Death as a group to become more truly a solo artist, but still creating comedy hip hop to this day, and he's got a lot of new stuff. But if you want to hear the South Park Junkie song that he made back in 1998, using my tapes to get all of the sound from the show, and he took that right to the top of Dr. Demento's Funny Five, and got a lot of notice for him. And he's kept that up, and keeps putting out music for the fans of both hip hop and comedy. And go ahead and check out his link in the description. So that's how things were in 1998. Me and him and the other two guys sharing everything. But of course, that's not going to work now. I really need to have Wi-Fi. And so, of course, today I still have a desktop computer, still a mid-sized tower. It's exactly this one. And you're thinking, well, that's not much of a computer. How can you do anything with that? Well, the fact is I don't do a lot with it. But I still need to have it connected to the internet. And it has built-in Wi-Fi. It doesn't have a modem, so I don't even have a phone line to connect it to, even if it did. But, of course, I had to get Wi-Fi, so I had to go to the cable company. And I'm not getting cable TV, I'm just getting internet. And I get a broadband connection, and I brought along my modem and my routers from my old house, and I got them hooked up here. And so now my computer can go online. But of course, it's not just my one desktop computer. Another thing I didn't have in 1998 that I have now and use primarily is my laptop. And that's what I'm making this video on right now. And it is my real daily driver. And of course, it's a Linux machine, because go Linux. And of course, it's not just these computers that need to be online. It's, of course, also my wife's laptop. She has the same laptop as me. Of course, she runs Windows, but that's okay. But then again, it's not just our computers. It's also, of course, my kids' laptops. And, well, I have additional laptops that I use for my day job. And, of course, I have all of these connected pretty much all the time. And it still doesn't end there, because we have phones, and we have our phones hooked up to the Wi-Fi while we're here, because, inside the apartment, you don't always get the good signal on the phones. And, well, it's not just that, of course. We have tablets, and, well, we don't have that cable TV, so we have to stream everything into our Fire TVs. And, well, of course, we also have a tablet, because we don't have a lot of space for books anymore. We got rid of a lot of books, still have a lot of physical books, but most of the reading these days, of course, is done on devices like a Kindle. But, of course, that's not all. Of course, you need to have Wi-Fi for gaming. So our Switch is hooked up to there. And it even gets so close to our physical person that even our watches have to be connected to the internet. And so that Wi-Fi has to serve everything. So through that cable company that we only get internet and not TV from, we are getting hundreds of megabits as opposed to tens of kilobits of internet access. It's needed to support all of these devices that need to be operating all at the same time. So yeah, a lot of changes have happened, but some of the changes, of course, are a lot more recent. And that leads me to how I have to now set up a whole new space for producing this content. So here in the basement, I need to have a desk. And I thought what would be neat for this video is to take a look at what kind of desk I'm going to build. In fact, we got a matching desk. My wife and I, we each got the same desk from IKEA. And the nice thing about IKEA, like their fellow Scandinavian company Lego, is it's a nice little fun project to build, but then you have actually something practical out of it, and it has that really nice Scandinavian engineering to it. So it really gives me a lot of the good feels. You get these fun instructions on there where you can see this happy little guy and all the things that he's supposed to do and the things that he's not supposed to do. And of course, everything has a fun quasi Swedish name. And everything has these fun little pieces in them. Of course, you got the pegs, these weird little nut things, and those connect to these weird bolts that you sort of drop in. And then you twist those little nuts together. And of course, you got to have the little dowels. And then everything comes together, and at the end, you have this fairly nice looking table. It fits right in the corner, and it's going to hold everything that I need on there, and even has a nice access to an electrical outlet right here on the side. So this is where everything's going to be getting created. It's going to be a fun time, and I think it's going to result in having some really nice new content and taking advantage of this space, not just to have all of my stuff in one place, but to be able to have things a little more sequestered from the rest of my house, and be able to even have an area where I can do more live shooting. It's not just casting off the screen. I can actually have real cameras and film actual things. And I think it's going to be a really fun direction for this channel to go in. And if you really want to follow where this channel is going, the best way to do that is to join our Patreon community. And these folks that you see right here, for as little as $1 a month, they're getting access to my videos and all the exclusive content that I post on Patreon. And they get to see those videos as soon as they're ready, ad-free. And then they also get to really help in expanding the channel and contributing to it directly, not just through the money, but through the community that has developed around Patreon, and polls and all sorts of cool things. So if you really want my channel to get to the next level, this is the best way to help out and to really contribute. So thank you, and I'll see you again real soon. Bye-bye.